Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. And if my voice sounds a little bit odd, or odder than usual, it's because I am freshly back from oral surgery and not in too much pain, but swollen all over the place. And I don't care. I hope you don't care either. The show must go on, and so it will. Anyway, today we're going to talk about Bach's great choral works, the ideal list. And there's actually going to be two ideal lists, and two separate talks. They have to be two separate talks. One is going to be devoted to modern instruments, traditional modern instruments. The other to the period instrument movement and period instrument performances. And it has to be that way because there are two entirely different worlds of Bach performance and interpretation, but both involve great music making. Truly great music making, and they both have to be accepted and respected for what they are. And the differences between them are fascinating. So this is talk number one, the great Bach choral works. And the great Bach choral works, excluding the cantatas, which we will have to deal with separately at some point. We're going to get to them. I'm trying to figure out how we're going to do it. And then one other work that I really believe belongs in a separate category, which is the motets. And I have separate recordings of those. We're going to do a separate video on the motets. That whittles things down to a much more manageable group of pieces, which I really think is important because Bach can be very, very intimidating. He wrote so much stuff, and it's great stuff. But you've got to have an entree. Now, I know a lot of people who watch these videos are already confirmed Bachians and major collectors and know all this stuff. But also, I hope a lot of people will find these videos who are not. And for you particularly, I want to say, take heart. There's a way in. And I'm going to try and explain to you what that is. There are 5 major, big-time choral works that you should know. I've already done a video on one of them, but I'm going to talk about it again here. That's the Magnificat. Bach's Magnificat is wonderful because it's about 35 minutes long and does everything a Bach choral work ought to do in 35 minutes. And so it's the perfect way to start listening to Bach's choral music because all of the things that the other ones have, you will find in the Magnificat, more or less. And it gives you a very good sense of this style. And it's almost entirely cheerful. It's not about death and misery like the Passions that we're going to talk about. So let's start our talk with the Magnificat. The other works that you have to have are the B minor Mass, the 2 Passions, the St. Matthew Passion and the St. John Passion, and the Christmas Oratorio. Those are the 5 biggies, really biggies. There are lots of others, but if you have those, you have the core of Bach in choral music. And really, that's as far as you'll need to go, unless you want to have a few cantatas and other things. If you become more serious about it, you can pursue his legacy at greater length, which can be the subject of future talks. But this is part 1 of 2 talks about the 5 great choral works, my ideal selection. So let's start with the Magnificat, because as I said, it's a piece that is very, very easy to digest. It's delightful. It's exciting. It's got a whole batch of short little movements and arias. And really, it's just the perfect entree into the world of Bach. I have 2 performances of the Magnificat because I don't know about availability, and I want to make sure you can get one of them. And in this case, and these will surprise you because these are modern performances on modern instruments with modern people, and they're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. There were, before the period instrument movement happened in the late sort of 60s and 70s, at least on disc, and they started to be recorded, performances of Bach's choral works were rather special. They were either done by choral conductors, choruses that had orchestras associated with them that were dedicated to playing Bach's music very, very specifically. And mostly they were in Germany, and you will see one of those. They were the Bach chorus of, name your German town, And then, of course, there were performances that were always done in Leipzig, where Bach worked, with the Church of St. Thomas. And they were church choirs with their, attendant pickup orchestras. And so those were the two kind of Bach performances there were. When a major conductor and a major orchestra did a Bach choral work, it was an event. It was an event because they knew that it was being adapted to a style which was essentially alien to the circumstances in which Bach himself worked. And to do it was an act of devotion and dedication. And that's what makes so many of these recordings special, because it was a privilege to perform Bach. And they did it with great seriousness and great intensity. And some of the performances are simply marvelous. And it's ridiculous to say that we shouldn't listen to them or that there's anything illegitimate about them, because the period instrument movement has come along with its research and its whatnot and said, oh no, this is closer to the way Bach did it. These are vocal works. They live and die on singing. You want to hear a great chorus. You want great soloists. And when you had the best soloist who thought it was a privilege to be able to come and perform Bach and make great music, I mean, what more would anyone have wanted? What more would have Bach wanted? So that's why these performances hold their own, and they're still terrific. And some of them may surprise you, considering where they're coming from. For example, this performance of the Magnificat with Daniel Barenboim. This is a great Bach Magnificat. Daniel Barenboim conducting the New Philharmonia Chorus and Orchestra, both of which, of course, are superb major orchestras that can certainly play Bach's music. But the soloists, great soloists. Look, you've got Lucia Popp, Anne Pashley, Janet Baker, Robert Tier, and Thomas Helmsley. It's a wonderful lineup of singers to do the Bach Magnificat. And that's what makes this performance wonderful. This one is coupled with the Fauré Requiem. I believe originally it came coupled with the Bruckner Te Deum, which would have been even better if you could find that. But that may have been, he may have had Bruckner Mass No. 2 coupled with the Te Deum. I don't know. Everything has been so chopped up and reshuffled and recoupled. But this is a wonderful, wonderful Bach Magnificat on modern instruments. It's exciting. There isn't a period instrument performance that does it better in terms of sort of tempo and sensitivity and musicality. It's wonderful, and it sounds like the Bach Magnificat. However, if there's a problem finding that one, I mean, I just think it's so important that you have a Bach Magnificat. Consider Robert Shaw with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra and Chorus. Now, Robert Shaw, of course, was the choral conductor par excellence in the U.S. From the 1950s on, he trained the choirs for George Szell, for Toscanini. Nobody knew this music better, nobody. And his approach is that of a chorus master. He wants the choral parts sung as well as they possibly can be. In the Atlanta Symphony Chorus, he had trained an amazing choral ensemble. He has a wonderful lineup of soloists. They are Dawn Upshaw in the first soprano part, Penelope Jensen, Marietta Simpson, David Gordon, and William Stone. You get the Vivaldi Gloria with it, which is a wonderful coupling. They go well together. They're two sort of jolly, happy, lovely Baroque choral works. And, when you have Shaw, when he went into romantic music, sometimes he could be a touch dull, except for, the Verdi Requiem and the Brahms Requiem for some reason. Those he did very well. But he could get a little dull in big romantic pieces. Mahler Eighth, snooze. Carmina Burana wasn't his thing. I mean, the choral singing is always going to be great, but where you need a conductor who has, a lot of, can bring out the character of the orchestra, sometimes Shaw was not at his best. But here in Bach, he also did a superb B minor Mass. These are wonderful performances, and they are a great way to get started learning your Bach. And even if you know your Bach and you think you know your Bach, and especially if you're a period instrument person, I would say listen to these things anyway, because they are legitimate alternative interpretations, and they show us the range of what Bach accomplished, and that's a good thing. Next up is the B minor Mass. Now, the B minor Mass is just wow. It's the ultimate setting of the Mass, along with Beethoven's Missa Solemnis. It's an astonishingly great work. It's big and long, but about, it's like an hour and a half. It's tolerable if you're, running out of patience. And the performance I have chosen here is, well, it's a classic. Carl Richter. Carl Richter with the Munich Bach Choir and the Munich Bach Orchestra, all of which he trained personally just to play Bach. And, this was the kind of heading towards a vision of authenticity that we got back in the day. These were recorded this was recorded in 1961. Very, very, very well, when early music was starting to make its reappearance. But of course, that whole instrumental movement and apparatus had not yet taken over our conception of what, period instruments and period performances ought to be. This is not one of those diminutive 1-2 apart performances. This is a thriller. I mean, the Et Resurrexit in the Credo is going to knock your socks off. I mean, it is really amazing. Now, there are 2 Richter recordings. There's a live one that came later, which isn't as good as this one. This is the one you have to get. And look at the lineup of soloists. Again, Maria Stodder, soprano. Herta Tupper is the alto. Ernst Hayfliger, great Bach tenor when he wasn't trying to do Das Lied von der Erde. Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, who was an amazing Bach singer in his fresh, young, early, non-barking days. And who's this? Keith Engen. Keith Engen is the bass. It's a wonderful, wonderful performance. And it is, the B minor Mass was assembled by Bach and never performed. Parts of it were. The various movements came from other works, and then he put it all together as a Mass. It was his testament, his choral testament. And it has to be, I just think it has to be performed like that. I have no issue with it being performed as a work of the future, as it were, and played to a fairly well. I mean, you want to hear the Sanctus, which is a 6-part choir. It should be sung like they talk about angels' wings beating and things. It's an astonishingly exalted spiritual experience, even if I'm lisping a bit because I have this retainer in here. But anyway, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And to play it, to give it its full measure, I happen to think often, not always, but often requires modern instruments. These teeny tiny 2 singers do a part and half a violin and all this. They can't begin to do justice to the work. They really don't, most of the time. There are exceptions in the period instrument group because sometimes you get a great conductor leading it and wonderful things can happen with, regardless of the number of forces you have. But these are still big orchestra Bach performances. And even if the orchestra and the choir are not large, and for purposes of contrapuntal clarity, the size of the work, the scope of the work, they're big conceptions of the work. And that's what makes them so wonderful, in my opinion. Really, really wonderful. So, Carl Richter on Archive for the B minor Mass. Again, there were alternatives. One of them being Eugen Jochim's last one with Bavarian Radio Forces, but we're going to mention him in a minute anyway, so I didn't want to have 2 Jochims. That one was on Warner. It's also worth considering. It's gorgeous. So, next we come to the Christmas Oratorio. Now, the Christmas Oratorio was actually 6 separate individual cantatas that were made to be performed on different days, and you can do them so you don't have to listen to it all at once. Listen to it in bits. Take it in pieces. No reason to listen to the whole thing. No reason to perform the whole thing at once. It's a good couple hours of music, and my recording of choice, as I just said, is Eugen Jochim. This is with Bavarian Radio Forces. It was originally on Philips. It's now bundled up in this big Jochim Opera and Choral Works box, which, of course, everyone should have. You may be able to still find it separately in a used version of its Philips original release. Jochim was such a great Bach conductor. He realized all that, the music's lyricism and humanity and emotional depth, and they're just wonderful, wonderful performances. All of his Bach was wonderful. It really is. He did the Passions. We could have used his anything by Joachim could have been in this list. But like I said, I always do one conductor per work if I can, to try and show you the range and variety of people who are operating in that repertoire field. So, who do we have singing here? Oh, this is what's really, listen to the singers. Ellie Ameling, one of the great singers of the 20th century in Baroque music and in Lieder. Brigitte Fassbender, fabulous thinking ladies contralto. Horst Laubenthal is the tenor, and let's see, and Hermann Prey, baritone, the sort of lyrical and more mellifluous successor to Fischer-Dieskau, or as a competitor to Fischer-Dieskau. There was sort of a Prey-Fischer-Dieskau competition going on in the 60s and 70s. Prey is a terrific baritone. So there you go. And you've got the Bavarian Radio Chorus, which is a knockout group, an absolutely crack professional choir, and the Bavarian Radio Symphony under a great, great, great conductor. So you cannot do better in the Christmas Oratorio than these guys. There have been wonderful, wonderful period instrument performances, and we will talk about some of them. But yay. Absolutely great. So that's that. Okay, now we get to the heavy guns, the two passions, the St. John Passion and the St. Matthew Passion. Now, I have to confess, I do not care for the Bach Passions very much. I admire them. I respect them. They have glorious moments. But I am not a penitential Lutheran on Easter Sunday. The story doesn't move me particularly. I have no interest in the spiritual or religious aspect, which I think is important and which I really think is one of the aspects of the text that Bach realizes so well. And I mean, there are beautiful arias, beautiful choruses. I enjoy them in the abstract. But do I really get into these pieces? I don't. I honestly don't. I find them grim and unyielding and somewhat dark and gloomy, and that's just how I feel about them. And I'm sorry. That's my thinking. And so when I do listen to them, and because I'm a professional critic and I know how to do my job, and I can recognize a good performance when I hear one, one of the great mistakes, I have to digress just for a second, that people make about criticism is that they think it's all about what we like. And when other people, everyone's pretending they can be a critic, particularly in this day of the internet, it's not about what you like. It's about what the performers do, how well they do it compared to what other performers have done. And your ultimate decision will obviously have to be whether it moves you, whether you like it, whatever, that comes into it. That's part of your judgment. But in arriving there, you have an obligation. You have an obligation to you, the viewers, to try and talk about performance and performance values and make sure that those matter as much as whether or not you're personally involved. And so when I review the Bach Passions, that's where I'm coming from. I really dislike the idea that just because it's great music, you have to worship it and love it and say it's fabulous. No, there are always going to be great works that don't appeal to you. We just did a talk about ideal Beethoven cycles, and I said I don't particularly care for the Eroica Symphony. I mean, there will always be great works by great artists that don't strike you, and it's okay. It's absolutely okay. And, the Bach Passions are works that strike me occasionally. When a performance is really, really gripping and on top of it, they move me. They will. And I can recognize a lot of wonderful performances that don't move me. And, it's the way it goes, guys. And it's the way it's going to be for you. And it's okay. If it's okay for me, someone whose job it is to do this, it's really okay to you, who have no other obligation than to find the performances that do move you and that you love the best. So that's where I'm coming from in talking about the Passions, and I just want to be clear about that and honest about it. So first, let's start with the St. John. The St. John Passion is the baby brother of the St. Matthew Passion. It's shorter, it's more lyrical, it's a little brighter in tone. I think it's easier to take. It's not as devastating and powerful as the St. Matthew Passion, but it's very beautiful. We all know what the story is, right? Christ gets crucified. End of story. Okay, so the St. John Passion, my performance, there are two, actually, again. One of them is Benjamin Britten's recording, which is in a big box, again, of Britten the performer, and you may still be able to find it separately, because it's always fascinating to hear one composer's take on another. But my choice is this one, Peter Schreier, who really just did wonderful work. There's a whole big box of Peter Schreier doing the great Bach sacred music, which is, again, first-class set. And it's available. It's on Decca, and it's available, and you can get it without any qualms at all. He is obviously influenced by the period instrument movement, but he's not worried about it too desperately. And, the performers he's got. Oh, this is so great. So, for the St. John Passion, he has the Passio Secundum Johannem, as it's technically called. You've got, first of all, the Staatskapelle Dresden, one of the great orchestras in the history of Germanity. And you've got the Leipzig Radio Choir, which is one of the great choirs in the history of Germanity and anywhere else. They're marvelous. They're the choir on that Herbert Kegel, Carmina Burana. You know, they were the East German choir that sang like gods. They were fabulous. And then you've got a wonderful lineup of soloists. First of all, Peter Schreier is himself a tenor, and he's the evangelist, and as well as the conductor. And you've got Robert Hall as Jesus. Robert Hall's a wonderful bass, and you know, Jesus, by the way, is always a bass. This was the Baroque period where your heroes were baritones and basses. They were not tenors. Very few major tenor roles in those days. And let's see, who else have we got here? For Pontius Pilate, who's supposed to be kind of whiny and annoying, we have Egbert Junghans, and let's see, who else is here? Oh, there's and just as like some extra singers here. Roberta Alexander, soprano in the arias, Mariana Lipovshek. I mean, these are wonderful singers. Olaf Baer, the baritone, to assist with the arias. It's a great lineup, stunning orchestra, smashing chorus. What could be better? So, Peter Schreier in the St. John Passion. And now we come to the St. Matthew Passion. You know which recording it has to be. There has always been a St. Matthew Passion which blows away all other St. Matthew Passions on regular instruments, on period instruments. That is the ultimate St. Matthew Passion experience. And it is Otto Klemperer's. Yes, absolutely, the Klemperer. It's incredible. It's incredible. You could always rely on Jewish guys to bring home the bacon and penitential Lutheran music, right? No, seriously, this is the one where, you know, like I said, I find the piece grim and sort of terrifying, and it's endless. This performance is 3 hours and 40 minutes long. I mean, 3 hours and 40 minutes long. I'll say it again. I'll say it for 3 hours and 40 minutes. It's long. But, you know, and the St. Matthew Passion has one of the greatest opening choruses. I mean, the greatest opening chorus ever written by anybody. I can get really enthusiastic about the St. Matthew Passion because this performance makes me enthusiastic. I don't listen to it often. I really don't. I don't listen to the St. Matthew Passion often. I think anybody who does probably needs psychiatric help. I mean, I don't understand why you would whip out your St. Matthew Passion on anything but very special occasions. It was a special occasion when Bach performed it. It couldn't have been done very often. It's that kind of work. And when you're feeling ready for it, that's when you listen to it. And because it's not going to be something, I don't think, you're going to be, you know, whipping out every 10 minutes and listening to, you want the performances you have to be special. And that's true whether they're on modern or period instruments. It doesn't matter. But this, oh boy, this was stylistically anachronistic when it was first performed. There were all kinds of arguments with the singers and Klemperer about conducting the recitatives and doing this and doing that and this interpretation. It is Klemperer's vision of the work. And his vision of the work is as uncompromising and unsentimental, and for that reason, as emotionally shattering as anything you are ever going to hear by anybody. And that's the truth. That's the musical reality. And oh my God, what a cast he got together for this. You have Peter Pears as the evangelist, Fisher D. Scow as Jesus, and then as the soloist singers, Elizabeth Schwarzkopf, Christa Ludwig, Nikolai Gedda, and Walter Berry. And you've got the Philharmonia Choir and Orchestra, which was, the best in the UK at the time, and everybody operating absolutely at their best. This was Klemperer, giving us a musical testament of sorts to his approach to music making, to his vision of the work, to his view of German history and German music. There is so much contained in this performance of the St. Matthew Passion. And that may be the part that really appeals to me because, like I said, the story I find, sort of grim and miserable and religiously I'm not interested, but musically, there is no more powerful statement on disc by anyone anywhere than the Klemperer St. Matthew Passion. I am not kidding. And so, those are my ideal major Bach choral works on modern instruments in the more or less modern approach with elements of, sort of historical rectitude coming in. I mean, how could there not be? I mean, there was always an element of historical rectitude. Unless, of course, you were Klemperer and didn't give a damn. That's where I would start my Bach if I am, just coming to Bach for the first time. And even if perhaps you started with period instrument stuff and you don't know who some of these people were, and you should know. You should know who they are. These are important recordings by major, major artists that deserve your time and attention. So those are my ideal Bach choral works. You, of course, will have your own. I'm interested to hear what they are. And next up, we're going to do a talk, soon, on the ideal list of Bach choral works on period instruments. I have to go back to the overflow room because, one of the things that happened, and I will talk about this a little more, but I just want to say very briefly, is that, Bach on modern instruments was something of a special event to do these complete works. There were not many, many recordings of them. And when there were that were accurate, that were complete, that were, that attempted at least to realize them in their totality. But when the period instrument group ensembles started happening, they became a dime a dozen. Now they're all over the place. There are thousands of them, and so a lot of them are now in the overflow room for reasons of space. They overflowed. That's what happened, and so I'm going to have to go back and get them and sort through them and see which ones we want to do. But there you go. There's the list. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you for paying attention to me in my debilitated state. I appreciate it to no end, and take care.